Wow, it's time for another show full of tips and ideas from the sales growth leadership expert, Dean Akers. Known for his experience in hyper-growing companies and creating cultures for high-performance teams, here's Dean.
Well, welcome to your Sales and Leadership Ninja Show. I'm your head ninja, Dean Akers, and every week I bring you a rant to stimulate your thinking in the realm of sales and or leadership. Today's show is Creating the Brand of You, Segment 3. Today we'll be adding to our last two episodes of Creating the Brand of You. If you remember, in the last two episodes, we built out the basics. This is the last segment of building the brand of you. Remember, just following the sales and leadership techniques we share every week will be helping you always build the brand of you and your improvement in both sales and leadership. A quick review of the last 2 weeks. Remember, ask those that are close to you how they see your first impression that creates your brand. They'll usually be transparent with you and honest. You want to really ask them that question and do it share with them why you're doing it, because you're trying to really build out the brand of you and you want their opinions, since they probably know what that first impression looks like the most. Remember, this is the first step in creating that first impression is so important. Part of that is creating the first step was the base brand identity, which is your email, domain, business cards, note cards, and envelope. This is mega important, and we've talked about that previously, both in the sales and leadership, and then also in segment 1. Then last week, we moved to your digital identity. Remember, this is important no matter what you think. Today's digital footprint, many times, is the first impression that people are going to give of you, even before they ever meet you. They'll know your name. Somebody may mention your name. They're going to Google you and they're going to look for your digital footprint. Always make sure you're covering all the platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. People will say to me, even TikTok these days, people say to me, well, I'm not on those segments. Remember, this is about building the brand of you and your digital footprint. So it's important that you take this serious. And that's the second segment. So what else could we really do about building the brand view? Well, now it's about building the size of the brand of you. And today's segment, I think you're going to get a kick out of, because this is that next elevation. It makes sense to do the brand of you where you have the first impression, and even a lot of you will buy into the digital footprint, even though not as fully as I would hope and expect. But this next segment, or today's segment, is really going to give you that extra kick over the edge of really creating this super brand of you. And this really has a lot to do with making an impression on people that you don't really have a chance to shake their hand or whatever. So what does this look like? Well, what is it about creating a bigger brand of you? The techniques I'm going to talk to you today about are some of these crazy platforms that really will set you apart from everybody else. First is to become an author. I want you to really think about writing a book. Yeah, you heard me, write a book. Some topics you may think about are your life's journeys, something you believe that can help others, or just a rant about a subject you're passionate about. It could be poetry, horse riding, whatever. And you want to do it because once you've done it, you've now become a published author. And today you can really get foot traffic or get traffic on the brand of you by publishing a book, and it's posted everywhere on Amazon, the various other publishing platforms. There's also, you say, well, how do I write a book? There's so many services out there for self-publishing today that can get a book written. All you want to do is Google, I want to write a book, and look at all the sites that are available. You can also get a ghostwriter if you're really nervous about writing skills. Fiverr is awesome. It's a gig site, fiverr.com, and you can just have a ghostwriter help you, or write your book and they'll help you edit it. The biggest thing is just do it. I can't tell you how many people will push this off. Now it's within the reach of everybody, and I'm such living proof. I've written 2 books and I'm working on number 3. My first book was 52 Wows, and it's been selling for years on the various book platforms. It's also an ebook and an audio book, and it's a relationship guide for men. And I wrote it almost 20 years ago. My second book, Self-Talk, Think Like a Child, is a book on self-talk, which is a self-help book. It helps people with stories that I share that have gone on in my life to convince them to get through times of self-talk. And self-talk is just something that you believe that's not true. So writing a book definitely ups the brand of you. Writing a book also is a great giveaway to people you meet. And lastly, probably more importantly, it's a great deal of self-satisfaction. And remember, I'm going to tell you, don't get caught up in perfection. Most of the people that I talk to about writing a book, they go, I want to write a book, but I don't know how to write a book, and I'm nervous I won't write it right. So I'm going to tell you a story about my second book. My second book I wrote, got it published and everything, and I'll never forget this. A friend of mine took me out to lunch, and he looked at me and he had a copy of my book, and I had autographed it and given it to him, and he said, you know, Dean, I love your book, but there's mistakes in it. And I go, well, tell me. So he opened my book. He had them all highlighted, and he found 2 or 3 grammar errors in there. And I'll never forget, because this is me really bringing it home about the importance of writing a book and not worrying about it. I looked at him and I said, can I ask you a question? And he said, yeah. Now he's pointing out all my imperfections of my, quote, second book I've written. And I looked at him and I said, can I ask you, how many more mistakes are there in my book than in your book? And he looks at me kind of dumbfounded and goes, well, Dean, I've never written a book. And I went, exactly. Mic drop moment. I've written a book. So many times people are worried about perfection, they never do stuff. Just get out there and write that book. If you make some errors in it, oh well. Guess what you've done? You've published a book. It's on Amazon. You've gotten your message out. And I'm proud of my message because it's helped so many people. Sure, there were probably some grammar errors, but more importantly, I got it done. And I'm going to tell you one other sideline of a book. A lot of times I'll write a book and I'll write a note in it, deep in it, and said, call me when you get to this page and I'll give you $20 or something or whatever. And then when they say, oh, I loved your book, I ask them to go to that page and then they read it and bam, you busted them. Don't do that. That's just being a smart aleck, which I tend to be, but the perfection deal, get past that. Next in creating the final steps in creating a brand of you is to create your own podcast. I'm telling you, this is so much within the bandwidth of you doing today. When you think about it, you're listening to my podcast, and you have a relationship with me. You may not have even met me because I have tens of thousands of listeners all around the world that now I have a brand relationship with. So I want you to look into creating your own podcast. It's relatively easy. You get a microphone, a decent microphone, and then I use OBS to record it. It's a free open broadcast software. It's easy to use with a webcam. And then you get your microphone and you're creating a podcast. Then I use Libsyn to produce my RSS feed. And you need that because you need a production software because that's how your podcast gets out on all the networks. OBS production software, it's free. So there's absolutely no excuse not to get it. And it works very well. Libsyn is the publication software again, and you can get it for as low as $5 a month, specifically if you're doing just audio and 4 podcasts a month. By the way, when you do a podcast, get somewhat in a routine of doing it. I do mine every week on a Saturday or Sunday, and I've got 150 episodes, I believe, now. It's just get in the routine of doing it. You can do multiple podcasts in segments and then push them out. I tend to do mine every week because it's a weekly rant, and there's something that turns me on every week to why I do it. But remember, Libsyn is your publication software, and you can get that publication software for as low as $5 a month. There's other software out there. Feel free to whatever you use. Just do it. The publication software creates your RSS feed, and that allows you to publish in one click to all the major platforms like Apple, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, iHeart, etc. It gets you out there. And when you start getting feedback from helping others and just, having this podcast, you really arrived at building the brand of you. My last thing I personally do for the brand of you is my handwritten, hand-addressed stamped envelopes I send to people every day. I generally do between 50 and 100 a week. I can't tell you how important that building the brand of you with these handwritten notes. They include birthdays. They include notes I send out. They could be anniversaries. It could be an event in their life. I keep them memorialized in a calendar program I use, but I write them every day, every week, 50 to 100 a week, depending on what goes on in the week. The unique to this brand touch has really been something that set me apart. I find it even more effective today in our electronic communication that everybody seems to want to email and everything. So one of my ninjas shared a story, and I want to share this because this really drives it home. He was at a big meeting, and everybody was talking about their email open rates, 15%, 18%, one guy 20%. And he raised his hand in this big group. He's one of the top producers in this organization. And so when he raised his hand, the CEO acknowledged him and said, "Yeah, what you got to add?" And he says, "I want to ask everybody in this room something today. Does anyone want to guess what my open rate is for my handwritten, hand-addressed stamped notes are?" My friends, that was a mic drop moment. You know the answer. It was 100%. So, the first brand of you segment you got really on the note cards. The second week we finished up with segments on the brand of you about different things you wanted to do. And now it's your turn to create the brand of you again by doing these podcasts and these other touches I brought out today. So remember, thanks for tuning in every week, and remember to share if this helps you. My book that I referenced earlier, Self-Talk, Think Like a Child, is available on Amazon. If you ever have a question about today's show or any show that we've had previously, just reach out to me at help@deanakers.com, and I'll be glad to help you. Have a great week in building the brand of you.
If you enjoyed this week's show, subscribe today to our podcast and send questions or thoughts to help@deanakers.com. Also, visit us at www.deanakers.com to listen to prior shows and view helpful videos. Also, great tips to download. Thanks again. See you next week.